Hello and welcome back to Effluvium. In this episode, we have guest Charna Ethier of Providence Perfume Company, and we're going to explore the subgenre of perfume that we know of as natural perfumery. Now, natural perfumery is a discipline that involves using only natural botanical materials or natural isolates of materials in perfume composition. So we're going to have a wonderful conversation with her coming right up. Rachel's going to be joining us about a half hour into the live stream. We're going to check in with folks as they start to file in. We have 4 people tuned in at the moment as we've just begun. And when you do file in, please feel free to chime in the comments. Let me know what your scent of the day is, or scent of the afternoon, evening, or night, depending upon where you are on the globe. And don't be shy. Let us know that you're here. And I'd be happy to share my scent of the afternoon. This morning was Santa Maria Novella Frangipani, for which I shared a review earlier today. And I decided for this afternoon to wear Champagne from Guerlain, as it is a perfect time of year for it. It's a beautiful May day here in Massachusetts. Let me know how the weather is where you're located. So in just a few minutes, we're going to bring Charna into the conversation. I see that she is backstage and waiting for us. So let me know if you appreciate Chanteaume in the more recent versions, like this B-bottle version from maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I haven't had it for 4 to 5 years, so it's pretty full. But from what I know, dating it, all that nerdy stuff. This was a release from, this version was from 2019. We have a comment coming through from Manginosis, and he wishes me and everyone good afternoon. Thank you very much, my friend. His scent of the day is Versace Metal Jeans. I'll be checking in with our guest here to make sure that everything is in working order, so just don't mind me. Please don't hesitate to chat in the comments as we're getting things started here. And once again, mention your scent of the day or your scent of the evening. You hear me eagerly, or I don't know about eagerly, but I'm typing here and just helping our guest out to make sure that everything's in working order for audio and video. We have a couple more comments coming in. Hello, Pat Lester. Good to have you here. And hello, Philippe. Scent of the Day, Rocabar from Hermes, a great 90s release from one of my favorite houses. We're going to allow a little bit more time for more people to file in. We currently have 7 people tuned in. So, for those who may be interested in today's soundtrack, this is a cut from the 1984 Stephen Winfield album. It's called Meadows. I've chosen it as our theme song for this stream. And we have 7 people tuned in. We've had 3 people chime in the chat. Now we have 9 people. So we have 6 more people who have not yet said hello in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. But I know that some of you are shy. Some of you are a little bit more introverted, and that's fine. I relate to that. I call myself sort of an ambivert myself. So I can be extroverted to a point and then need to power down and have some time for myself. And our guest Charna will be with us shortly. And as I was saying earlier, we're going to have a discussion on natural perfumery. Charna is a natural perfumer with her own house, Providence Perfume Co. I've sampled her work. She is among the best of the natural perfumers for whom I've become familiar. And that counts some pretty well-known perfumers out there who are in the natural perfumery realm. And we might dispel some myths about natural perfumery, and maybe discuss, the practice itself, the challenges that come with it, maybe even the orthodoxy that some might have in terms of natural perfumery, even especially in this age of greenwashing and clean living. Some may turn to natural perfumery as the sort of the healthier alternative to conventional perfumery. But I appreciate natural perfumery more for its celebration of these often noble, as they say, botanical materials that are really given a chance to shine and to present themselves fully in a way that is seldom possible in conventional perfumery. And I think that's why I really do appreciate natural perfume. We have Endymion 1. Good evening from Munich. Scent of the day, Fils de Dieu. Wonderful weather there as well. Lovely, lovely springtime. I love the springtime, and I love autumn. I love the temperate weather. Hi, Bren. Hello to you. Very nice. Yeah. And there are some that, for those who may be concerned about the quote-unquote performance or longevity of natural perfumes, it's not necessarily true that all of them are ephemeral. There are a lot of base materials that will linger on your skin for many hours. So I do see that our guest has video, but we may still be working on audio. I'm not going to bring her in yet until I can see. Just let me know, Charna, if you want to give me a thumbs up once you're ready, and we'll bring you in from the backstage. And once again, we're going to have Rachel joining us at the 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time mark to add to the conversation. So it'd be great to see her. She hasn't been available for the past few Effluvium streams, so it'll be wonderful to have her back. And Charna, let me know if you want to give me a thumbs up from backstage, if you're ready video and audio wise, if you want to come in. Oh, I can't hear you though. I can only see you. So do this if you're ready, or this if you're not. Ready? Okay. Awesome. Okay. Well, folks, we're going to bring in our guest here. Oh, I just noticed that you have a private chat. Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, I can't hear you when you're backstage, but I think that we'll have you come in. If there's any issues, we can work around that. So without further ado, let's bring in Charna to the conversation here. Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Wonderfully so. Yes. Loud and clear. And that's good. Not too loud, though. Hopefully, I'm not too loud. Hopefully, I'm sounding okay.
Okay,
so we have great video and great audio. Well, thank you so much for accepting my invitation to join us in one of the Effluvium discussions. So
thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Let's just... That's an abrupt ending to the theme music. There's no way to kind of... I don't really have like levels to kind of turn it down slowly. It's just when I turn it down, it goes from volume to none. So let's start off with natural perfumery. For our audience, can you explain to us what makes natural perfumery what it is?
Well, I think that natural perfumery is really a beautiful art form that kind of, differs from mainstream perfumery, and that, the ingredients are botanical and obviously come from nature. And it's the thing that I really love about natural perfumery is that, the terroir, the land and the sun and the air and the water and the growing conditions all change the way that the plant smells and the distillation process. And so you have so much nuance and texture with the ingredients that we work with, and that they have such a rich history, and that they are also very challenging to work with. And so that level of complexity and beauty is what really draws me to working with them, and what I really enjoy about natural perfumery. They really kind of tell a story on your skin, and I like that sort of evolution that they have.
Yes, I agree. The evolution and development, it's almost sort of like there are different sort of movements to it, to use sort of an analogy with music, with music composition, and these phases and these acts. If we're thinking of analogies with an analog with theater, and like you said, with perfume, the natural perfume materials are almost perfumes in themselves. So that's why it poses sort of a challenge, if I'm correct, to be able to create that. A discrete composition so that these materials work well with each other, and that can be a big challenge. Can you tell us, a little bit of what are the biggest challenges of working with just a natural palette?
A lot of challenges with working with, a strictly natural palette. Well, there's the complexity issue. There's sort of the issue that sometimes when things are distilled, they don't smell the same way as when they're growing. Like for instance, basil, perhaps when it's growing, has this beautiful sort of fresh, herbaceous, almost tomato leaf kind of aroma. And then when it's distilled, it can almost smell like cannabis, or have like this sort of skunky aroma when it's steam distilled. So you sort of have sometimes those issues where sometimes when plants are distilled, they don't smell the same way as when they're growing. So bringing it back to the way that we smell it when it's live and growing isn't always the same way it's smelled when it's sort of steam distilled or solvent extracted, can be a challenge. And then add on to that often the way that natural perfumes are judged or critiqued is by synthetic perfume criteria is also very, very challenging, because we're sort of judging these fragrances on potentially how long they last, or there's certain scent categories that are almost impossible to duplicate when you do only work with natural ingredients, like aquatic scents, for example, are almost impossible to duplicate for the natural perfumer because they tend to be all built around one particular aroma chemical. Cologne, for example, and by that I mean Calone, not an eau de cologne. And so if you don't work with that, ingredient or that aroma chemical, it can be very hard to duplicate that category of scent when that whole category of scent is sort of built upon that one particular ingredient. So if your idea of an aquatic perfume is something that is sort of this fantasy soapy, aquatic scent, and it's all built on that one aroma chemical. And I say, well, here I've got Seaweed Absolute that smells like salty, seaweed or fish, or I've got like a neroli that's particularly soapy. That isn't what the mainstream idea is of an aquatic fragrance, so you have lots of different challenges, from price to growing conditions. I could go on and on. So working with natural ingredients can be very, very, very challenging.
And give us a little bit of background on your journey to becoming a perfumer. Can you tell us of the origins, where that all began?
So I am a self-taught perfumer. And to be honest, if I could have gone to school and studied natural perfumery, I absolutely would have. I am one of those sort of, book nerds. As a matter of fact, I was an English major and went into publishing after college. And so when I realized I wasn't feeling particularly fulfilled in that career, I was working for a textbook publishing company, and I really wanted to be an editor. And to move up in that company, you had to do a stint in sales, which is very interesting because working in sales and potentially being an editor are two very different job roles in publishing. But I would go around to, local colleges and meet with professors and say things like, do your students have trouble learning about the derivative? Let us look on to page 197 where we can see a clear example of the derivative. And when I decided I no longer wanted to work in that career, I was a little bit lost. And I ended up working, going back to waitressing, my fallback for many, many years, from 13 to 20 something. And then I ended up working for a company called Aveda many, many years ago. And so that is where I really, I also worked at fragrance counters before that, or at like Filene's or places like that. But it was really kind of at Aveda where I saw they had a couple of, natural perfumes. And I really mean a couple. I think there were like 2 or 3. And they had this really loyal customer base of people that would come in who honestly loved fragrance, but for perhaps one reason or another, couldn't or wouldn't wear, mainstream fragrances. Like they just didn't like the smell of Chanel, or, I don't know, they were recovering from cancer and had been told to avoid, parabens or certain, chemicals or something, or they just got migraines if they were around too much fragrance. But they loved scent, and they were so loyal to these 2 natural fragrances that had been around forever that Aveda made. And now we're going back like 20, years now. And I just remember thinking, why is no one, making perfumes for these customers? They're dying for natural fragrances, and they're so loyal to these 2 scruffy old perfumes that have been around forever that Aveda's been making. And they really love perfume, and they would buy more if they could. And Aveda was really, I felt like, at the time, sort of beholden, to using a very small subset of ingredients that they could get in massive quantities. And I was very drawn towards, the more exotic, of course, expensive, hard to find ingredients. Once I started dabbling, I was like, coffee flower, and you can distill the flowers and they have an aroma. Like, this is amazing. I want to make perfumes with these beautiful ingredients. And like, I really felt like there was a customer base out there that liked fragrance and would be interested in perhaps purchasing these perfumes. And you have to remember, this is before the whole boom of, eco-friendly perfume,
Right.
greenwashing or anything like that. So that was really kind of my start. And I remember like the exact day that I decided that I was going to leave and start my own business. And whenever I tell this story, my friends will say like, Charna, TMI, TMI. I had recently had a baby and had to come back to work. I think I was like a manager or something at Aveda at that point, and I really wasn't looking forward to it. And I remember I was sitting in like a handicapped bathroom in the back office at Aveda, and I was trying to figure out how to like make this breast pump work, and I had no idea how to work this breast pump. And I was sitting in there and I was like looking at this thing and like trying to figure out how to hitch it up, and I was like, this is really no fun. I don't want to. And I'm sitting in there, and all of a sudden someone came banging on the door, and they were like, Charna, like that the junkie is back and she's stealing all of the shampoo from the store. Hurry up, you gotta come out. And I was like looking at this breast pump, and it was making these noises, and I was like, nope, not happening. You get all the shampoo, don't care. Maybe 10 minutes after that, someone else came and they banged on the door, and they were like, Charna, the district manager called and she said you're gonna have to work Christmas Eve in Boston. And I was like, am I though?
Right.
I think I'm gonna leave, and I think I'm gonna start my own perfume business, and I'm gonna make natural perfumes. And I think I'm going to try to sell them online, because I don't think I'm going to be able to get into like, Macy's and places like that. And I remember telling people what I wanted to do, and they thought I was absolutely insane. They were like, you're never going to be able to do that. Who's going to buy it? Like, it's not going to smell like other perfume, and no one's going to know who you are. And who's going to buy perfume online when they can't smell it? And I was like, no, but I'm gonna sell samples. Like, I'm gonna sell small samples online. And they were like, okay, best of luck, good luck to you. So, yep. So I had tons of support.
Yeah, people were concerned for you, because at the time, as far as I know, I mean, so when did you start? It was some time ago. This is
years ago.
So it was kind of punk. It was kind of punk rock then.
It wasn't a popular idea.
Yeah, it really wasn't. It was a very, very niche. That's such an overused word when it comes to perfume. But this is in the truest sense of the word. It was really a niche thing. Like, I very seldom came across any of it. Maybe I would come across it at like farmers markets, because essential oil blends. So I had a very naive impression of natural perfume.
And it wasn't very good, by the way.
No, a lot of it wasn't.
Mine wasn't when I started, nor what was out there wasn't either. Right. So,
and when I even started perfume making, I started with just a natural palette. And I know in the very beginning, mine weren't very good, because I had so much enthusiasm, and I just thought that I could create magic. Like, there was just going to be this alchemy, because I just knew these things would come together. But obviously, like, we're working with some pretty profound materials that can do some not so great things when they're not handled with care. So what did you find to be the most challenging things to overcome working with a limited palette of naturals?
Now, looking back on it, I think that I was very drawn to challenging ingredients, things that I would classify as accessory notes. And at the time, I perhaps did not know they were accessory notes, so I was very drawn to like these, super exotic, expensive ingredients that were hard to work with, but I didn't know they were hard to work with because I didn't have enough experience. And I would struggle with them and be like, why can't I get this black tea absolute to work? Or I'm trying to think of like galbanum, or I don't know. I'm just trying to think of like challenging things, like, like smelling cognac, like green cognac. I thought it was going to smell like boozy. And then I was like, it smells like bile, you know,
like
acid or something, you know, and like I kept trying to make it work and like it didn't, you know, and so I think I was very drawn to these like challenging ingredients, and then didn't really know necessarily how to use them, or the fact that you have to use a minuscule amount of them and they're
traces.
just for
Yeah.
effect, you
The
know,
whole
tiny
concept.
bit.
The
Right.
concept of traces like eluded me for like the first like year. Like
Right.
it didn't catch on to me that like some of these are meant to be used in traces. Some of them are meant to accent, like you say, like they're not meant to be like the star player. Like that just is not going to work. And you named some of them. I remember one time I was so obsessed with galbanum that I can't remember what the percentage was, but I'm pretty sure it was a percentage that like Germaine Cellier would have like frowned upon it. Like it was like the most obscene like version of like Vent Vert with just naturals in it. I remember having people smell like, doesn't it smell like, you know, you're in a garden? And they're like, I mean, maybe if you're like, I don't know, chewing on the grass and rolling around in the plants rather than walking by. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, so that was definitely a downfall of mine. And then I have to be honest, this might make me kind of sound like an egotistical ass a little bit, but sometimes I really do wish that I was a little more confident in my abilities, because at the time, you know, I would talk to other other people who were perfumers or wannabe perfumers, and I took what they said for verbatim, you know. And as I got older, I realized there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. There's a lot of people who want to tell you this is the only way you can do it.
Yeah.
It's my way or the highway,
right.
you know. And it's one of the reasons why I don't teach a lot of perfume classes. You know, I teach 1 or 2 a year, but I really wanted to instill in people that there's so many talented perfumers out there, and they're all teaching in a different way, right? So there can't just be this one set way, no matter what some of these perfumers will tell you, like you have to do it this way and you must know the molecular weights and you have to like, no, right? So I kind of wish sometimes that I did have a little more confidence in myself when I was starting out, because I look back now at some of the things that I did, and I mean, I was kind of like a little revolutionary, and I didn't get credit for it. I got thrown under the bus. Like people say like, oh my God, she made this perfume called Indolise that's super skanky, that had a ton of indole, and who would ever want to wear that? It's so gross. And now there's people making like, I mean, come on, like no one was doing stuff like that back then, and it wasn't an unwearable perfume by any means. But or like I again totally didn't know this was illegal or what I was doing, but at one point I was selling tinctures that I made to help other perfumers like capture scent that were hard for them to capture naturally. So like I was making tinctures of like freeze-dried fruit when we didn't have access to any of these Robertet fruit compounds.
Right.
Like on the base notes forum, oh my God, they were crucifying me,
I'm
saying
sure.
so stupid. Like, what did I think I was doing with these like tinctures? And now I'm like, is Fraterworks selling tinctures? I think that they are. And I was doing that. And people were like, she's so dumb. Like, what is she doing? And I'm like, was I really though? And like, you know, I didn't really have the confidence. I thought it was cool, but when all these people were like, what are you doing? You don't know what you're doing. I'm like, okay, well, I'll just keep doing it for my own line then. Like, I thought it was cool and a service, but maybe no, you know?
Yeah. Now, I know that the word gatekeeping tends to be overused these days, but in truth, I think that in certain forums and circles, there was sort of a level of gatekeeping where people tried to discourage others from thinking outside of the box, that it had to be this very structured and academic kind of approach to it. but some of the best innovations come from throwing that out and just experimenting and thinking outside the box, or unlearning things after you learn them. And I recall the same thing, like on forums, the ideas that I had and how they'd be sort of picked apart, and there initially there's like that sort of discouragement that comes from it, but after a while I just wanted to try to just like listen to myself, and and it's good that you do that, because in the end, that's what moves you forward, that.
Oh, I've learned to do that a little bit more.
Yeah.
I just wish that I did have a little more confidence in myself when I was starting out, like in retrospect, looking back at it, when people said, oh, no, oh, honey,
Yeah.
that. I was like, oh,
they're there.
I didn't know that I couldn't do that. And now I'm like, Charna, why did you listen to them? There were times when they'd say you couldn't do it, and I would try it, and I'd be like, no, actually, you can dissolve mimosa in that, and I would try it and be like, why did they tell me I couldn't do that? I don't know. You live, you learn, right?
Of course. Yeah, it's so true. We have Bren here, who is saying hello and letting you know that Heart of Darkness and Iris, and your first oud offering, so is it, which one is the Heart of, so he mentions Heart of Darkness and Iris, and the first oud offering, is one of those the first oud offering, or is that three different perfumes?
Rose Bohem, is that one has oud in it?
Okay, that may be what.
Oh, and it's Iris Gay. You get it?
Iris, I'm like, I'm trying to be Elise.
Iris. So it's like a little sexier than the typical, old lady powdery iris scent. And that one also has oud in it. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
To make it like a little, it has a little more dirtiness going on.
Yeah. Very, very cool. I'm personally a big fan of Moss Gown. I love Moss Gown. I have a sample of Moss Gown. And Rachel, who is backstage, I think listed that as well. And we're going to bring her in to join in the conversation.
And Bren, thank you so much. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it.
I'm so excited to meet you, Charna.
Hi, Rachel. I'm happy to meet you as well.
And I'm such a big fan of your work. I have many bottles of your fragrances that I purchased from the lovely Jana at Fragrance Vault. And
she's great.
Yeah, so I'm so excited. Yeah.
Especially during COVID, so many of us lost most of our wholesale accounts, and she was one of the ones that held on. So I will always keep her an American perfumer in my heart, because that was a tough time for us little perfumers. So
yeah,
thank you.
What a time it was, 2020, 2021. So Charna, I wanted to ask you, what are some of the most beloved botanical materials, the ones that you may not necessarily even use them that often, but you're just in love with them? Can you tell us a few of your favorites?
Sure. Okay. So I love jasmine auriculatum, which is a really rare, hard to find jasmine. So I'm not trying to pick like really hard to find things.
No.
But I have like a little bit of an obsession with jasmine auriculatum, because I smell it and I think it kind of smells like, this sounds bad, like you wouldn't like it, but it kind of smells like jasmine and cigarette ashes in an ashtray together, which sounds terrible. But whenever I smell a really good jasmine auriculatum, which is super hard to find, I think Hermitage might have some right now, and they might be like the only place.
White Lotus used to. That's where I got some, and we know they're gone now.
Too.
Yeah.
But I picture, like, when I smell it, I instantly picture like your great aunt who's on her third husband, who drives like a Lincoln Continental, and she probably chain smokes, and she still wears a fur coat, even though it's like totally passe and out. And she wears like a bright lipstick, but it's always smeared a little bit too much. And she probably drinks a little bit too much. Is there something about like the personality that when you smell jasmine auriculatum, you can almost like smell a person, or you can almost smell a perfume that's just dying to come out of jasmine auriculatum. And you can use it in different ways considering it's so distinctive, but I just love that ingredient so much. And then there's like, the powerhouses of different roses and jasmine. But there's a really cheap rose, like a Rosa Gallica that Liberty sells, which like this is like a good secret, right? Because it's like a dirt cheap rose that's like a powerhouse rose. It's like one of those roses that people who say I don't like rose, and if you just smelled it from the bottle undiluted, most people hate rose that way. But this Rosa Gallica is super cheap and it works in so many different perfumes as like just a workhorse, like smoothing agent. It's like a flower that you can make every other flower work with, or you can hide it like it's in Heart of Darkness. And it's so inexpensive. And you never say that about natural perfume ingredients.
Right.
Everything's so expensive. So I love this super inexpensive Rosa Gallica. And then there's this, you've probably smelled it, Biolands, which bought Eden, has this cool distillation of labdanum that's called, I think, Dynamone. Have you smelled
Dynamone?
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm into that a lot. I put a whole bunch of that in Lapsang Lover, which is this smoked black tea.
Oh, that makes complete sense. Yeah.
It's like really leathery. And we like actually tinctured the Lapsang Souchong tea in this distillation. It almost smells like a bad guy at a bar wearing a leather jacket that you shouldn't talk to, but you just have to. I love that ingredient so much too. I'm really into this Dynamone. I'm really into it. I love that ingredient because it smells like labdanum, but it has a lot more going on.
Yeah, it's almost like some of those destructive distillation type materials where it brings out all those phenolic and smoky qualities. Really
but
cool
not
stuff.
Too much, right?
Not too much, yeah.
Ones like they go so far over that you can only use it in small dosages. I feel like you've got like a good balance where you can really play with it and use it extensively. So I love it.
Yeah, it's not like birch tar or cave where it's like, the tiniest amount you risk ruining a whole formula. Like you can actually use a pretty good amount of it and it doesn't overpower. Yeah, Dynamone's excellent. Wow, I haven't even thought about Dynamone. Biolan have a. I love Bois. Is it, or maybe that's Robertet. Robertet, I think, has something called Bois de Lan, and I love Bois de Lan. Oh my goodness, it just smells like an enchanted forest. But that's one of my favorites. Any others?
Let's see. What else do I really like? I mean, I'm a sucker for orange blossom. I like the poopy ones. I like the clean ones. Like I like all of them. I've always loved orange blossom absolute. I like it much more than neroli, to be honest with you. But I mean,
Can I ask just real quick while we're talking about ingredients?
Oh, of course.
I've always wondered because Charna, I have some of your bottles and I've had a couple of them I've had for years and years and years. And something I'm so impressed with your fragrances, I know you're an all natural perfumer, is just how well they hold together over time. And I don't know if you can tell me if it's a misconception that this is hard for natural fragrances. Maybe this is just an incorrect notion I have in my head from who knows where. But I'm curious, do you put BHT or any preservation materials in there? Or I'm curious how that works in natural perfumery.
I don't, but I will tell you that. So a couple of things. So
sorry, that's my school.
I really feel like we're in session right now.
Any base note heavy fragrances tend to get better and better with age, almost like scotch. They tend to get like richer and deeper and smoother. And the ones that don't get better with age are the top note lighter eau de colognes. And that's why I tend to offer those as sort of ironically, I didn't do one this year, but usually every spring or summer we come out with like a limited edition eau de cologne. And the idea was to only make it available for, it's usually a year if it sells well, a little bit longer if it doesn't. And the idea was to buy it, use it because it doesn't age well. Like those top notes are, obviously volatile and they kind of go off more quickly. I really do think what it is, though, is that two things. Natural perfumers, because the ingredients are so expensive, I feel like sometimes they underdose, like they don't use enough
Mhm.
quantity of essence in their
Mm,
perfumes because they're so expensive.
mm,
So I feel like sometimes that can be an issue. And I
mm,
don't, and part two is for as far as longevity and aging goes. I don't always do this, but I am a big fan of tincturing.
mm.
And the reason that I'm bringing that up is it's not that every perfume I would use a tinctured alcohol, but for example, when I'm doing these tinctures, I'm using it as the base alcohol for the perfume.
Oh,
So like I would make a tincture for Iris-Gay, for example, with orris root, in the perfumer's alcohol. And I would let it sit for, 6 months or 8 months or something. And then I would filter out the orris root, and this perfumer's alcohol would have a pretty not super strong, but relatively strong orris aroma. And then I would use that perfumer's alcohol that's infused with that smell of orris as the carrier alcohol to make my perfume in. So I'm almost like layering the
yes.
scent, if that makes sense, almost like a cook, making food. And I think that also helps with this longevity and in process of the perfumes lasting longer as far as a shelf life goes, or that's what I'm
Yes.
trying to say. Yeah, I'm
That's
stumbling
That's
a little bit here on my
amazing.
words,
It
but I
kind of
think
reminds me
Yes.
of like you're making a stock,
Mhm.
like that
yes.
already is infused with some of the flavor, if you will. So the aroma, and then I love that. I love that. It never even occurred to me to really do that. I mean, I did some, dilutions in alcohol, but never to do something like a tincture, alcohol as the carrier. That's really cool.
And I do that a lot. And I guess the orris root wasn't the best example because most of the time when I do it, I'm doing it with something that has natural sugars or starches in it, like a jasmine rice, like
Mm.
literally dried jasmine rice, right? And so even though I'm filtering out all of the rice, a fair amount of the starch is actually left in the perfumer's
Oh,
alcohol. And even when I filter it all out at the end, or like freeze-dried raspberries or something, a fair amount of that sugar and starch is still left imbued within the perfumer's alcohol. And that really helps slow the evaporation rate of the perfume from your
Yeah.
skin, giving it good longevity on your skin as well, making it last longer on your skin. So that can give good longevity to the scent on your skin as well.
That's
So,
ingenious because you can use that in place of what in conventional perfumery would involve certain types of fixatives,
right.
synthetic fixatives. So, and I think that is actually, the obstacle for a lot of natural perfumers is finding something that has that more substantive kind of fixative value, because even with the naturals like patchouli and vetiver, they may last long, but they still only have so much as far as like evaporation curve. That is so fascinating. I love that. I love that.
And then if you do use those base notes, then you've got that heavy, stereotypical natural
Yes.
perfume that's got that
Yeah.
base note heavy scent, right? So then you're
Yeah.
stuck back in the stereotype of
yeah.
the
Right, because you only have 4 or 5 to work with. Oh, is this going to dry down to a labdanum, a vetiver, a
right.
patchouli? You'd only have so many to dry down. So it gives you a little bit more freedom to kind of
Mm.
flesh it out with other things instead. That's really cool.
Mhm.
I love that. I love that.
And would you, just as a follow-up, thank you, as a follow-up, would you mind talking a little bit more, unless you've already, because I'm a little late coming from school, but unless you've already talked about it, I would love to learn more about your tincturing process, how you learned to do that. Did you study with a perfumer? Did you figure it out on your own? Like, what do you tincture?
First, Rachel, I just dump some stuff in a mason jar. um, no, I mostly experimented on my own, and I've had a fair amount of failures, for sure. So I will say it's a lot easier to tincture dried material than fresh material. So I was dead set on tincturing lilacs, which, in New England, we have lots and lots of. And so I completely stripped all the lilac trees in my yard one year. And when you do fresh material, you pull off all the lilac flowers and put it in some sort of glass jar and add your perfumer's alcohol. And then when it is like something fresh, you have to keep removing it every day and putting more fresh flowers in this case. when you do something dry like cardamom cloves or rice or freeze-dried fruit, you can kind of leave it for a long period of time. So it's much easier. And then if you want it stronger, you would remove it and add more. But with something fresh, you have to like do a lot more work, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so I did this with all the flowers in my yard in half of my neighborhood. And after the whole summer was over, it didn't smell like anything. And I was so mad. And I pushed it to the back of my refrigerator and kept it. And I pulled it out the next year and did the same thing again. And at the end of the year, I was pissed because I had wasted 2 years on this giant mason jar of lilac tincture. And as I was putting it away, after the second year, I was like, I should just pour this out because I've wasted 2 years of my life doing this stupid project. And I ended up spilling a little bit on my hand, and I realized it actually did smell like lilac.
Are you serious?
You should never smell it from the jar. That was dumb. Like I should have like tried to put some on my skin. But it still isn't that strong. Like it's not enough to really carry the perfume. It was like a subtle back note. So certain things are much more successful. There was also an Asian pear incident where it smelled like wet cardboard. So there are a lot of fails along the way. Definitely want to pick something that is fragrant ahead of time. And it's much easier to make a tincture with something that's dried, you know, like cinnamon sticks or cardamom pods or freeze-dried fruit or basmati rice smells like popcorn when you tincture it. And jasmine rice has a beautiful like tapioca, creamy, milky. So for me as a natural perfumer, not having access to a lot of lactones, I love jasmine rice because that gives me that like milky, buttery, creamy tapioca, Thai food kind of aroma. So there's not like a lot of specific details to it, which is something I kind of like about it. So it's not like you must measure out exactly this much. You must, you know, the one thing I will say is once you get the tincture as strong as you like it, it's best to use it. You know, like I like to use it as the carrier alcohol for my perfume to enhance that particular note. I've noticed like, let's say you made a peach tincture with freeze-dried peaches and you pull out all your freeze-dried peaches. If you just leave that alcohol sitting there, that sort of like peach infused perfumer's alcohol and don't use it, it does start to get dull after a while. So you kind of like use it to make your perfume then.
Yeah.
But it's not a very like meticulous, process other than you should, I should make it sound more formal, but you should label it and say you put 1 cup of freeze-dried peaches to 16 ounces of ethanol or whatever. But I kind of like the fact that you can kind of experiment. And when I used to teach in-person classes, I don't know why I thought this was funny, but I would put out all these ingredients on the table so the students could make a tincture and these little mason jars to take home. And they would always mix things, which I don't know why to my mind, I wouldn't do that. I would make one thing because then I would think it would be more versatile. I could use it in more ways, but they were I made a cocoa nib, cardamom, rose petal tincture. And I was like, okay, cool. So they would mix a lot of things together to make the tincture, which you can also do. Yeah. I would make one thing. And the other thing that's cool is just because you made a peach infused tincture as the carrier alcohol, you could use that in a fougere. You don't need to be matchy with it. Do you know what I mean? It can create an interesting back note. It's not so strong that it takes over the perfume. So they're fun to sort of play with. And they also make a massive difference in the longevity of the perfume too.
It's surprising how some of those materials that seem so subtle and they're not immediately noticeable are actually doing the heavy lifting in the background. That's really cool. What are your thoughts on natural isolates? So the ones that would, where the feedstock is a natural material, but in the end it's chemically identical to, say, a synthetic version. Because I know there's a lot of controversy. Well, not really controversy, but a lot of debate rather on is that really natural or does it really make a difference? Just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on those.
I am okay with them. I mean, I think that if you can isolate vanillin from cow manure, let's call it recycling. And you can absolutely do that. So
Yeah.
I am okay 100% with it. And in my industry, they're so controversial. So I know a lot of natural perfumers won't use them. They don't consider them natural because you can't say, methyl and thranolate grew out of the ground. I don't have a problem with using them. That being said, I'm not an expert at using them by any means. So I dabble in them, and I'm not great at chemistry. So that's not the way that I approach my perfumes. So I wish I could learn more about them. You wouldn't believe how hard it is to learn about natural isolates. I have like one book that I can find, and I'm sure you know the book I'm talking about. There's like
Probably in this pile right over here because I did a recent post, but yeah.
There's hardly any books where you can find out anything about natural isolates. You can find out things about isolates, but not necessarily about natural isolates. So I dabble in them. I'd say about maybe half of my fragrances have a natural isolate in them. I think they open up whole new worlds to the natural perfumer. I am not opposed to using them, but I know a fair amount of natural perfumers refuse to use them. They don't consider they're natural because it's not natural. If you have to isolate eugenol from,
well, it really does open up the conversation of how is natural defined. Like, to me, I really appreciate natural perfumery, not because of any sort of orthodoxy, which I was going to ask you about orthodoxy because there's a lot of that in natural perfume as well, but because it challenges the artist, because I also consider perfumers to be artists. Another debate. It challenges the artist to use this limited palette to the best of their ability to really get the most out of it, and to limit it to anything that has botanical origins. To me, I personally think that that's natural perfumery, because I'm not an absolutist when it comes to natural either. So I think that it is perfectly fine for a perfumer to use natural isolates, purely because, with my knowledge of chemistry, because I was a chemistry nerd, part of why I got into it as well, the origin, the feedstock of the natural isolate is natural, and the resulting isolate is chemically, there's no debate as to whether or not it's not natural, because all of them are found in nature.
Right.
So that's the way that's my take on it. But yeah, if you don't mind, we can only get into it as much as you feel comfortable, but there is some orthodoxy in natural perfume, where there are some natural perfumers who say it absolutely, you cannot use A, B, C, or D because it's no longer considered natural perfumery. Or there are people who advertise their natural perfume as superior or safer than conventional perfume. So what's your perspective on that? If you're comfortable with that. I know this is as hardball of a question as we'll have here, but
no, it's
it's
okay. I mean, I honestly think from a business perspective, it's super challenging for me, because I don't really fit into any of those boxes. Like, I like perfume. I like all perfume. I choose to work with this palette because I find it beautiful and challenging, but I've never pushed my perfume from that health perspective. In any time I've ever been approached by a public relations person or that's exactly where they want to go with it. Like, okay, so we're going to tell everyone they're going to die if they wear regular perfume, but if they wear your perfume, and I'm like, what? No, that's not how I want to try to sell fragrance. Like that. No, that's not me at all. From a marketing perspective, that can be super challenging to figure out, like, where do I fit in then? Because I just like perfume and I choose to work with these ingredients, but I am oh, it's really hard to say. Like, I'm not militant, but I do only work with natural ingredients. But there are other natural perfumers that would say, but you work with natural isolates, so you're not really natural. And then there's customers that will ask, like, exactly what perfumes do you have that have natural isolates in it, because we don't want to buy anything that has anything like that in it. And then there's perfumers who don't even know that I'm natural at all, and they don't care at all. So not many natural perfumers have customers from multiple groups. I don't think I'm saying this in the right way.
No,
it
does make sense. And I love the idea of folks who would come into your shop and just say, oh, this is a perfume shop, and they sample your stuff, and they're feeling it, they like it, and they don't even notice yet that it's natural perfume. That
Most
it's not.
of them don't. And most people, we have a custom perfume bar, and this surprises me even more. Most of the people who book appointments to come in to make custom perfumes, we tell them over and over again that all the ingredients are natural. They're like, okay, so do you have Egyptian musk? And I'm like, yeah, no. we don't have that. Like, we only have, like these 50 ingredients, which is kind of a lot, but we only have natural ingredients. But like, they can't even tell, which surprises me. And they're very happy with what they make. It's interesting to appeal to a wider audience, and it's very challenging to appeal to a wider audience when you only work with naturals. So
you come across so many different types of consumers who have so many different expectations, and
perfumers and not fitting in or fitting in, and it seems like I just can't really fit in either group. Like the synthetic perfumers are like, oh, she's a natural, she's vegan, right? And I'm like, I just ate like chicken, I just I can't seem to, neither group wants me. I just do my own thing. I just make my perfume, I just keep my head down and I work. I like lots of perfumes. I just used to work with this palette, and I do use natural isolates. And if I use them, it's, you need such a minuscule amount to add nuance.
For sure.
And they do open up this whole new world. I don't know if I'm answering the question enough.
No, you totally are answering it exactly as anybody, could answer it in your position. And it's valid. What you're saying is valid, because like I said earlier, for somebody to be a natural perfumer, there really shouldn't be this expectation that there is some sort of ideology behind it, that the natural perfumer is doing it because they think that synthetics are unsafe or harmful, or they don't smell as good. There isn't that kind of mission statement behind it, which unfortunately some natural perfumers do that, and they run with it. That's their whole mission statement. And usually I take issue with that, because it's sort of alienating a whole potential customer base who want to explore natural perfume without being proselytized. So I really prefer the natural perfumer to just let their work speak for itself, and not really have some greater sort of message behind it about it being superior or being safer. So that's what I really appreciate about you and Mandy Aftel and a lot of others who've put natural perfumery on the map, is it's not really about that at all. It's about more, to me, it's sort of like a celebration of these botanical materials and of using things that are natural. That's okay. Using things that are naturally derived to create these compositions. I think that it's another approach, and a fascinating and beautiful approach. I think that bell means that we're going to do a quick intermission. We always do a quick intermission halfway through. We're going to have everybody back in just a minute. So stay tuned. And welcome back to Effluvium. We have Charna Ethier of Providence Perfume Company. She is our guest panelist for this discussion. Going to bring in Rachel. We'll chat a little bit. It's so glad to have you back. It's so glad. Listen, it's so glad. It's so great. And I'm so glad to have you back. We haven't had you for a while. We missed you.
Yeah, I missed you too. Just life got in the way for a little bit. Yeah.
Well, I know what that's like for sure. Yeah, I relate to that, and it's great to have some of our regular folks tuning in here. We have, is that an angstrom? It is. It's an angstrom. Beautiful attitude to the craft. Well, thank you. I'm not sure if you're referring to what I said or what China said, but or Rachel, but thank you very much, angstrom. Whoever you might be, we're glad that you're here. And you could be somebody who we already know going by an alias, but even if not, it's great to have you. Charna is back with us here. We're going to bring her back in. And now, Rachel, I want you to pick Charna's brain about some of your favorites that you listed, so that you're going to take the floor here, and I'll just kick back and listen and enjoy.
Oh, thank you. Well, I know that, Charna, you mentioned that you sometimes do limited release fragrances. And I am lucky enough to own one of them. And I don't know if you don't want to talk about this specific fragrance because it's I don't believe it's for, you mentioned it was not for sale anymore now because it's a limited release, called Indelice, which I'm lucky enough to have gotten a bottle of. This is what it looks like.
I love the bottle.
Beautiful bottles, and I adore it. I love this fragrance. It's like this rich, earthy, dark, like deep forest. To me, it reads deep forest fragrance. Like it feels like the living floor of the forest to me. And I grew up in the Ozark forest. We moved around a lot, but for a very formative period of my life, I lived in the Ozark forest, and it was just like, like the dirt, when you have really alive dirt, like with organisms that are growing and dying, and it's all, that whole cycle of life and death is in that soil, like it's, for me, the fragrance captures all of that in this brilliant way. And it's amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I love it. There's, I think there's maybe mushrooms in it, I believe, if I remember from the note listing. And then I know, JJ, you love spikenard, and I believe there's also, if I'm remembering correctly, spikenard in it. And it's just,
wish there was more of it in perfume, to be honest.
Oh my gosh. Like friends, if you haven't tried Providence Perfume Company fragrances, these are some of the most interesting, like intellectually interesting, sensorially interesting, just unusual, uncommon, brilliant fragrances out there. So if you like things that aren't, the typical run-of-the-mill fragrances, I invite you to definitely check them out. They have the coolest little sample. When I got a sample pack, and it came with some beautiful samples with like covered in moss, like in this beautiful bed of moss, and I was just totally taken away by it and the artistry. So sorry, I'm talking too much.
Oh, you're good.
But I don't know if you might want to talk a little bit about that particular fragrance, or about your limited releases in general. But yeah.
Okay, so Indelice has an interesting story behind it. So I launched that perfume a million years ago, and before you came on, I didn't really talk about it, but I was making a joke about how I was ahead of my time. And so that perfume, when I launched it, I inadvertently, because I was, maybe a new perfumer, or maybe we could say I was cutting edge, but I think it was really because I was a new perfumer. I used a lot of really polarizing ingredients in one perfume. So that perfume had seppies or mushroom in it. It had jasmine auriculatum, as we were talking about earlier, one of my favorite jasmines. It also had spikenard and a ton of oak moss, and it had cilantro. And just like the people who hate the taste of cilantro, those people also hate the smell of cilantro as well. So this perfume was reviled. Like, I got trolled for Indo when I launched it. People said it smelled like a sweaty fraternity house. It was funky, poopy, and this was the idea. It's called Indolise. Okay, but Rachel, I have to tell you why it smells better now, because it's mellowed. So let me just keep telling you. Okay, so it was like pretty funky. Okay, like the mushroom was like swarthy and salty. It was more pungent than what you're smelling now. Okay, so I got like really kind of raked over the coals for that perfume. And I remember one review said, Providence Perfume Company Indolise, digging in the dirt. That was the headline of the perfume review. Okay, no problem. Did not sell very well. People were like, this is skanky, post-coitus, like swarthy, sweaty fraternity house, like whatever. Okay, so fast forward a number of years, and unfortunately, where I had my first store located, there was a fire there, and I almost completely went out of business, and I lost like so much, and I ended up losing one of my formula books. I used to handwrite all my formulas, and I didn't record them on the computer because I'm old fashioned. I do now, don't worry. But I lost the formula for Indolise, so I can never make it again. I can barely, I can remember some of the ingredients that were in it, but I don't have the formula anymore. And maybe a year after the fire, I relocated to a different store location. And when I moved, I ended up finding like a mother bottle of Indolise that I thought I had lost in the fire, and it wasn't hurt. And so I had, I don't know, not very much, like maybe 32 ounces or something of Indolise left. But now it's like 8 years old, maybe. And it smelled amazing. And it wasn't as funky or as poopy
That's true now. Yeah.
Rich as it was when I originally launched it. And I was like, wow, this aged amazing. It's not as ripe as it was when I first made it. It's actually kind of like a beautiful, almost like chypre now, like a foresty, like soft. Okay, so I re-released it with a limited number of bottles, which is what you ended up getting. So it was much softer now, but in the same vein, honestly, in the same vein as it was, just a little less indole forward as the original version. And so that was Indolise. So I can never, ever make it again. I don't have the formula. It burned in a fire. It was a pretty unique perfume, but it aged very well. It definitely was a little more subtle after 8 years and not as funky as it was when I first released it. So that was the story behind Indolise. And I get asked for it maybe twice a month, like not a ton, but people still ask me for it. And I'm like, I can't ever make it again. Like, I don't have the formula. Like, it all burned up. I can never make it again. I'm sorry. I don't know. I'm just guessing. I remember there's a lot of patchouli in it too. Like, I can just guess and remember what I did 15 years ago when I made it. It was maybe the 5th perfume I ever launched.
Oh, wow. Oh, it's brilliant. It's so gorgeous. And wow. And I'll send you some, JJ. You've got to smell this. I mean,
it sounds like you have a real treasure in your hands there.
Yeah.
I think it's very vintagey smelling too. Like, it doesn't smell like a new perfume.
That would appeal to me for sure.
Yeah. And it has just the right level of funk, I think. You know what I mean? Like, it's just.
Yeah, you may not have liked it in its heyday. It was pretty ripe in its heyday.
Yeah. Cilantro essential oil, I remember being really tough to use. Okay. It's powerful. Oh my God. But I do remember, like, when using minuscule traces of it, it would lend something as close to like an aliphatic aldehyde effect, because it's really aldehydic, the essential oil. So I could see that working for somebody who wants to create that effect with naturals. But yeah, it sounds fascinating. I'd love to try some of it. And it's so sad. It's like it's just, there's no way of recreating it. It's just forever lost. Do you think that you could do something that's sort of like a I don't know. I was gonna say a flanker, but that makes no sense. Like sort of like a, part two, sort of inspired by it, or have you just decided to kind of keep it in the past as a
I mean, I probably would keep it in the past, but mostly just because they're like, it's tough. Now that White Lotus has gone out of business,
yeah.
I can't, I don't have another way besides like Hermitage to get Jasmine auriculatum, and their price is too high for me to use them as a
Yeah.
supplier to actually produce the perfume. So like I'm
Yeah.
having that same issue right now with Love in a Mist, which is like a wildflower perfume
Yeah.
with the Nigella Damascena. And so I
Yeah.
just made my last batch of that perfume, which I haven't told anybody that yet. But I can't, there's no other place for me to order that ingredient from now. And I used to get that from White Lotus. And I think Hermitage sells it for something like outrageous, like $400 for like 5 mil or 10 mil or something.
What?
Yeah. So there's no way I need like 4 ounces of it to make a batch of that perfume, plus Jasmine auriculatum, like
Yeah.
a bunch of other, like plus
Yeah.
pink lotus, plus, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's been tough lately since COVID, having them. I know they went out a little bit out of business before COVID, but I feel like with this industrialization of perfume, natural perfume ingredients, like I kind of think of it as the Amazon effect. It's worrisome to me that there's
Yeah.
fewer and fewer small batch suppliers and these bigger conglomerates, and then there's like fewer options or places to order from, and like there's only one person who's distilling this ingredient anymore. I've noticed that since COVID. It's slightly worrisome to me
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
someone who's like
Yeah.
small. It's already a stretch for me to order by the kilo. Like my kids and I are eating spaghetti, so I can order Jasmine all week, because I have to buy a kilo, and people have no idea that it's like
Yeah.
$1,000 for a kilo
Super
of
expensive.
ingredients that are natural. The profit margin between like a synthetic niche perfumer and a natural perfumer is wildly different.
Right.
Like wildly different.
We Are Sentient says, surely it would be a skanker, not a flanker. I thought that was clever. That's our friend We Are Sentient.
Yes.
It's sense of humor. You mentioned Love in a Mist, the Nigella Damascena Absolute, and that was my memory of visiting your store. And I think this might have been your second location.
Okay.
You've had 3, right? Or have you had just
2? Yeah,
2. Oh, so you actually had a fire probably at the one that I visited then?
Was it really small? My first one was really small, and my second one was bigger and really long.
So what year did that happen? Because I think it might have been like 2016, 2015, 16, like around there. And that's when I discovered your shop.
I think that would have been my newer one. I would have just moved into the newer one, I think.
Okay. Well, when you were there, you actually had a large quantity of the Absolute.
Yeah.
And I was just so struck by it. And I actually bought some myself because of it, to experiment with it.
That's how like we perfumers show off our like flash. It's like our money. I'm like, you want to see how much Nigella Damascena I have? Check this out.
Well, I was floored because I mean, like I knew that it was a pretty rare material. And I loved the shop, and I was inspired. I actually bought some quantities of natural materials from you. Okay,
I'm remembering this now. Yeah.
I was a little budding natural perfumer, and then I moved on to more conventional perfumery. But I still have a huge love for botanical materials, though. I mean, even if I were to start composing again, I would use as many as I could get away with. I remember there was one that you offered. It was like sunflower, and I was so fascinated with it.
I don't think that was from Robertet. I don't think they make that anymore. I hate that about them sometimes, because I'll try to go back and get it, and they're like, no, sorry, little thing, no longer. And then sometimes it'll come back, or sometimes I'll see it on Perfumer's Apprentice, and I'm like, oh, How are they
Yeah.
getting it?
Right. And yeah, you had some great stuff. I remember you had Sichuan pepper as well. So you had some great stuff that you were selling in small quantities for folks. I wanted to get to because so we have Eden Botanicals, and you mentioned earlier it was just acquired by Bioland. Is this another sign of that sort of Amazonification that we're talking about? Is it also the reason why they changed their logo to something really bland and they have like a really bad website now?
Yeah.
I'm more just worried that, I think in the past they probably bought from a bunch of different suppliers and then
Yeah.
sold. I feel like now that they're owned by Biolands, all they're going to be selling are Biolands
Biolands.
products, which might be
Food.
good for some people that couldn't order directly from Biolands. But on the other hand, I feel like there'll be less diversity of product because all they'll be selling will just be like Biolands products. That's what I'm more worried about.
Yeah.
And I already see them whittling down the options, like maybe they used to have 3 different or 4 different Nerolis, and now it's slowly just going down to like 1, and it's the one that Biolands distills, or you know what I'm saying? That's what I'm kind of seeing, and I'm like, crap.
And I can't help but to think, how does that affect some of those smaller suppliers as well? Those partnerships, and then they're ending, what happens to them? Like how can they sustain their business if they don't have anybody to carry their materials? That's kind of upsetting. Oh God, you have me thinking.
In my second career,
Yeah.
I wish I could go out and do that. Yeah, I really do.
Oh yeah. I could totally see myself if I were able to make it happen. Just have that more of a hands-on process with the, obtaining the materials or working with people who obtain them to do, the distillation and all that sort of stuff. Another cool subject is different. So somebody might think like, oh, rosemary, there's just one rosemary, or lavender, lavender's lavender, but it's not true. There are different chemotypes, different terroir, depending upon where they grow, they might have different scent profiles and stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those differences that maybe those of us who are, laymen in perfume might not notice,
I mean, this is like potentially a slightly generic response, but if I go off my point, try to bring me back, because sometimes I do that. But for instance, one thing that I think is interesting is that a lot of niche perfumers don't have contact with customers directly. They potentially just sell online, so they don't have like a lot of interaction with everyday people or the everyday customer. And so having a brick and mortar store for so many years was really, really interesting for me, because I had contact with customers, the good and bad, every single day. So I learned a lot about what customers like and don't like, and what they say they like, and what they really like, so like, for instance, a lot of customers will, when they're smelling something and I can tell they don't like it, they'll fall back on a term, because we don't have a lot of vernacular for scent, and so they'll say, oh, this one's kind of spicy. And there's probably nothing spicy in that person at all, but I've learned the word spicy means they don't like that word.
Oh, not spicy in a good way.
Right. For some reason, people will fall back on the word spicy to mean that they don't particularly like something in there. Another thing I've learned is people will say they don't like sweet things often, and they'll gravitate towards every sweeter perfume. People always say they don't like sweet, or they might not know the word gourmand, and then they'll gravitate towards the sweetest perfume. So I find that interesting. Along these lines, what I was going to say is people will often say, whatever you do, don't show me anything with rose. I don't like rose. But they've probably never smelled real rose. Or if they even had a chance to smell it, their only point of frame is like maybe Bulgarian rose or Bulgarian rose auto essential oil, which in my head, I always think of as bitchy rose. You know, the, bitchy, sharp rose.
Yeah.
Right, like sharp fingernails, like
exactly. And so, as you probably know, rose is like a workhorse, especially in natural perfume.
Yeah.
Honestly,
It's so
probably
important.
90% of my perfumes, or maybe 80 or something, have rose in it. Even like Heart of Darkness, which is like a super strong fougere, you would never expect, has a ton of rose in it. Like Tabac Citron has a ton of rose in it. And so it's kind of funny that people would say, whatever you do, don't show me anything with rose. And I'm like, okay, everything you just smelled has rose in it, Or then I would take them over to my perfume organ and show them like 8 different roses. And they'd be like, this one smells like coffee. And I'm like, yeah, I know, that's like Rosa Borboniana. Isn't it crazy how it doesn't really smell like roses? But most people don't have any exposure to smelling real rose because it's not used very often in mainstream perfumery. And so that would be an example of something like you're saying, where there's so many different types of roses and different species, and there's some that don't smell anything like the stereotype of like old lady tea rose, which is like most people's point of reference, or like a really bad Glade plug-in, that's like rose smell. Like that's what people's idea is of rose,
Right, like that like heavy phenyl ethyl alcohol rose that doesn't have much nuance in it. Yeah. Although I do love Perfumer's Workshop Tea Rose, to be honest, even though that does come off old lady people. But the average person might not take well to it. Now, I just wanted to share a quick comment from Styx. 10.2 Stronghammer. He's a friend of the channel. It's spicy, but not too spicy, which brings me to the fact that, it isn't just your average person who's into who just wants to, explore perfume. There's even people who are content creators who have a difficult time describing stuff. Like recently, somebody on a video said, the rosemary, it doesn't have the spiciness of the rosemary, but then again, it is spicy rosemary. And rosemary is one of those where, that wouldn't necessarily be, the first adjective that I would use to describe it. But when we're talking, some people who have a limited vocabulary, that's what they're going to reach for. They're not going to reach for aromatic. How many people off the street are going to be like, it smells so aromatic and camphoraceous, So, even perfume enthusiasts, there's a limit to the kind of vocabulary that they can use to describe things. Pardon me. Sorry for having to clear my throat. I did notice, Rachel, that you wanted to chime in with something. So
I just wanted to make a quick comment that for our friends who are listening who don't know Providence Perfume Company, that one of the great strengths of Charna's fragrances, to me, at least in my personal opinion, is that the quality of the materials in the bottles is so high. It's striking. It's so striking that and I'm sitting here and I'm smelling through some of my own personal stash. It's just, you compare these bottles and the quality of the materials and the amounts of the quality materials that are in here, and for the price, I'm just like, wow, this is amazing. It's so high quality, just compared with a lot of any fragrance that you go into CVS or Pennies or Dillard's or wherever you buy, wherever most people buy fragrances, kind of the commercial fragrances. And this is just, it's stunning, really, the quality. Just like we're sitting here and talking about all of these amazing ingredients, and they smell so beautiful, and there's so much of them. And I know, like, talking about fragrance oil concentrates that, so much of them is like 3% or whatever, but it really is tremendous. These are tremendous. And I hope everyone will, go and, try some of these if you can. Like there's the two that I've been wearing recently by Providence Perfume Company that I'm really have been digging on just for the season are Moss Gown and Drunk on the Moon. And there's a material called Baronia that I really love that you just don't find very often in fragrance, that's in Moss Gown. So I just wanted to throw that in there because I'm so glad we're talking about materials, because it's really something that's striking to me about this fragrance house. So
thank you, Rachel. That is probably the best compliment I've gotten in a really long time. You know the way to my heart. I mean that. I sincerely do. I really appreciate you saying that. I think that sometimes, people in the perfume industry, whether you're a perfumer or a writer or a blogger, we get in like this bubble, we get so saturated with like marketing and like all these gross terms that like bloggers and like people are like, is it a panty dropper? Like,
Oh God.
like this whole like gross world. And,
super gross.
yeah, I'm just saying like, one thing that I've always tried to remember is, I grew up in a blue collar family.
Me too.
Okay, right?
I relate to that.
I don't forget that, right? So like there was this guy that used to take two buses here just to buy patchouli oil, like just to buy this patchouli oil that he would wear that he said like his wife really liked, like I think that scent can be for everybody. And it's tough when you work with naturals, right? Because they cost so much to make the perfume. And so it's tough for me because I have to charge more for my product. I always joke it's a little bit like shopping at Whole Foods versus like Price Chopper or
exactly.
I don't know, I'm trying to think of another chain that's not like a New England Piggly Wiggly or I don't know, something like that,
Safeway, there you go.
Right,
Safeway is a common one.
limited on what I can do. But what I do try to do is really like make a quality product and use really quality ingredients. Like I think Baroni is like the second or third most expensive perfume material in the world. And it's this beautiful flower that only grows in Tasmania or sometimes Australia. And they almost look like little miniature Japanese lanterns. And they have, oh my God, I love this flower so much. It's probably one of my most favorite perfume ingredients. It has just the most amazing smell. It doesn't even really smell like a flower. It kind of smells like how would you describe it?
Oh, to me, a Baronia flower, which I had, pardon me, I had the distinction of actually smelling like like the actual flower, and the absolute is not too far off actually. Like there's like tea and tobacco and like maybe a little bit of dried fruit and like just like some aspects of it remind me of kind of like Nivea cream too, because it's like a lot of beta iodine. Just so many like facets to it. It's just that's one of my favorites as well. Like the Baronia Absolute that I had. I remember I got some from Enfleurage, New York City several years back, and it turned out to be one of my absolute favorites. And I was destined that one of my first releases would feature Baronia, but it is like a one of a kind kind of smell. Like it's not quite like anything else. One of my favorites. Yeah.
Well, maybe one day your first release will one day.
If I ever do actually have a release. Yeah. I love the flowers as well. And I love the color of the flowers, like this maroon, this mysterious,
aren't they so beautiful?
Mysterious looking flowers. They're just enchanting, just wonderful stuff.
I've only seen or smelled the pink ones, but whenever they show the ingredient in Australia, they're brown. So I think there's like 2 different species of Baronia that they. But did you notice, Joseph, when you smelled the pink ones, like the stem is kind of spiky like rosemary, and if you like the stem of the flowers, it has like a really camphorous smell.
It's strange.
It's weird.
Like there's like an oil in that too. Yeah.
It's totally different than the smell of the flowers, which has like a hint of raspberries and like powder and sunshine. Like it has so much going on. There
is like a raspberry thing too. Totally. Like almost jammy raspberry.
Jammy is a perfect word for it. It's such a cool flower.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look like a flower. They look like little alien
pollens. They do. People should look up like some images of Baronia flower. They're really fascinating. Right now we have 10 people who have liked this stream. Remember, algorithms count. Somebody told me that I have to start putting my mug onto the thumbnails of all my videos, which I will not. The algorithms are not that important. But what is easier for me and for everyone is to do a thumbs up. Let's try to get 20 thumbs up. We currently have 10. Let's try to get 10 more. This is part of my, this is when I start talking about all the things to help support the channel. gonna do that stuff too. So buy me a coffee. I want to thank. I was going to congratulate him as well. Congratulations for supporting me. I want to thank Bren Lynch for buying 3 cups of coffee. That means the world to me. Thank you for being a longtime supporter. You can buy me a coffee at the link that is in a pinned comment in the chat. www.buymeacoffee.com/JosephColdP. 6 cups will get you a sample pack from my huge surplus of samples. 12 cups. Once again, this offer is returned. Only one left though. So only one. 4 full bottle grab bag plus a sample pack for the first person who buys 12 cups. If you're watching this recording, don't try to get the sample pack. We're going to try to do the sample pack for the live stream. So once again, 6 cups, sample pack, 12 cups, a 4 full bottle grab bag, plus a sample pack. US only, please, at this time. So yeah, just wanted to bring that up. And back to the conversation, you remember we were talking about Baronia Absolute. What are some other floral absolutes, some rare floral absolutes that are worth mentioning? That I don't know. Makes your heart skip a beat.
I don't know how rare it is, but I am very partial to the Robertet Mimosa Olescence.
Ooh, I actually purchased some of that from you. One of the that one's beautiful.
I'm a big fan of that. It's weak, so you have to kind of use a lot of it in a fragrance. Yeah. But I find it super versatile. Also very clean. So like when you can use it to duplicate like lots of different flowers, like you want to make a honeysuckle accord, or you want to make this accord, or use it in the Magnolia Mist perfume, along with Magnolia, which was really hard to work with, by the way.
That's really,
I was determined to use real Magnolia in the Magnolia, and I was like, ooh, this was pretty tough, but I really like the Mimosa Olescence. I use it in lots of different things. Super versatile, albeit weak. So you really have to use a good amount of it, but I love that product.
I could see, the gears are going in my mind with Mimosa Olescence, using a significant amount and then shading it a little bit with with stronger materials, so that the stronger materials don't like completely bury and dampen it. And then you have that as sort of the core, and then everything else is sort of like supporting it. That's just my brain.
It's like a great harmonizer, and it's also like not super expensive, and it has that beautiful sort of like cucumbery, watery kind of floral aroma. And keep in mind that with natural mimosa, I remember this from the very first time of ordering products. I ordered, Mimosa Absolute, and I remember opening up the box and like opening up and pulling out this like white rock and being like, what do I do with this? How do I make this white rock work in perfume? So I love the fact that it's like a pourable, liquid, easy to use.
Right.
That's, you can use it in alcohol. You could use it as in an oil carrier. So I really love that product.
We Are Sentient is giving me some tips here. Your mug plus pointing and looking vaguely surprised. That's the YouTube way. Maybe I can just practice a little bit here. Like that? Or but I have to be kind of off center. Or maybe I point to, okay, I have to go in this direction because these are the perfumes I'm talking about. Like that.
There you go. That's perfect.
Yeah. All right. I think maybe I'll change my mind. Okay. Thank you very much for that suggestion. Great stuff. I remember Mimosa Olescence being like a bitch to work with, like having to, oh my God. And also, what was the other one? I'll have you chime in a second, but I'm trying to think of one other one that was like the Tolu Balsam, like trying to make Tolu Balsam work. God.
So sticky and
Yes. Rachel, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. No, I was just, you're talking about this just made me wonder, Charna, are you in the middle of working on something now that you could share with us? Or maybe if you don't want to do that, talk about your most recent release. I'm just kind of curious, what's been percolating in your mind or are you doing, go ahead, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking, Rachel. So recently I did a big revamp, rebranding. So that has taken a lot of creative juice. So I wish I could say that I spent all my time smelling things and working on perfume, but so much of it lately has been, I've done a new website, I did new labels, I did new boxes, like all sorts of stuff like that. So that
Oh,
has
cool.
been, so that has been taken a fair amount of time. So everything's looking pretty good, pretty more cohesive. So I like that. So that has most recently what I've been working on. But my newest release came out a few months ago, and it's called Xvii. And there's a little bit of a funny story about that one. So Xvii is like a rose, raspberry, amber with like just a hint of cocoa, which to be honest, most people say they can't smell. I mean, I can smell it, but almost everyone is like, I don't get the cocoa. And I'm like, really? You don't? That is the newest release that we launched, which I was pretty excited about because I got to work with some new materials in that launch. And so the kind of interesting thing about Xvii was the name of it came to me way before the perfume did. And so I was at the gas station one day
A great source of inspiration. Gas station bathrooms, gas station convenience stores. Yeah.
Classic Charna. And it was I must have been like a total different gas station that I ever go to. And I was filling up my car with gas. And it was one of those weird gas stations that they have like the TV or like, you know, the like,
I know you're talking about, yeah.
Like, and so it scared the crap out of me because my back was to it, and I was like pumping gas, and all of a sudden, you know, they're really loud, and it roared to life behind me, and it was like, "Hello," you know, it was like some sort of TV podcaster, and they started talking about the vocabulary word of the day, and I was kind of being egotistical, so I didn't turn around, and I was like, "I bet I totally am gonna know what this is." You know? I was an English major in college, so I was like, "Yeah, I'm not even turning around. I bet I know what it is." And so they were like, the vocabulary word of the day today is Xvii. And I was like, what? I've never heard of this. So I had to turn around and look at it. And they were like, Xvii means a raucous, loud house party. The origin of the word is unknown, but we think it might come from the French for chez vous, meaning your house. And I was like, this is such a great name for a perfume, Xvii. And in my head, for some reason, I instantly thought of the Austin Power movies. You remember those old movies that were like, and he like that theme song of him dancing at the beginning, you know?
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh, I so want to make a movie. I want to make a perfume called Xvii. So it had been percolating in my head, this like great idea for this like kind of like bold 1980s, 1990s, like big, like maybe fruity, like clubby kind of perfume, you know?
Yeah.
So that was sort of the inspiration for the fragrance. So it's like this big kind of like raspberry rose, kind of hint of cocoa.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah, like amber, but not a sweet amber in the base, like a very like dry amber. So that was the newest release that we came out with, I think like in January or maybe something like that, December. That was the most recent release. So that was what I most recently completed. So moving on to new things now, but I really was just trying to get this like new website, new labels, new boxes, like trying to get all my packaging and everything cohesive, which I know sounds super boring, but so much of being like the small business owner is doing a lot of
the tedium of it, right?
Like that, exactly. Getting things rephotographed. We're in the midst of getting like all the ingredients rephotographed now with like new labels. It's like, you know, not the most exciting stuff, but in all honesty, that's what I've been working on for the past couple of months is like kind of trying to get everything cohesively looking good. All my ducks in a row, you know?
I
Yeah.
love that name, Shavu. It kind of sounds like a name that would have been given to like a perfume by like, I don't know, like Coty or Fabergé in the 80s, like the new perfume, Shavu.
I
And it would have
know.
like it would there would be like ads in like 17 magazine or like on TV during like daytime television, and the lady would be holding onto the bottle like Shavu, new from Fabergé.
I thought it was
Love it.
a name. Like, and I just thought it was so funny that I was at the gas station pumping gas when this came out behind me. I was like, what? Shavu? You don't say. Such a perfect name. A house.
And like how educational, like I never even would think that they'd have like a vocabulary
I
for
know,
it. Like
right?
usually it's like some crappy like Hollywood gossip thing.
Yeah.
It.
On right after the vocabulary word of the day, by the
Of
way. That's
course, of
immediately
course.
what it changed to. And I was just sitting there thinking, Shavu, huh?
Yeah.
Who
It
knew?
was like serendipity. It had to
Yeah.
be. Like that was the only time they ever had a vocabulary word. It was like when you were there. Just so that it could give you that word, you know.
It was very funny too, because when it came up on the screen, there were like all these like little fake clouds floating around when the word Shabu floated up. You know, it was very funny. Yeah.
That's awesome. I want to try it. I've only tried a few of yours, and now I definitely want to try that. I want to try the Indolise. So Rachel, thank you for sending me a sample of that. Yeah, is there anything else that's in the pipeline for you, or is that just going to be your release for now, or anything else in store?
I was like toying around with like some tropical smelling things. I made this great tincture of cardamom from, have you heard of Diaspora, the spice company? They're kind of amazing. This is like, I don't know if you'll be able to see this. This is,
We'll zoom in so that we can get a better
sorry,
look. Let's
trying
see
to
here.
turn it
Oh,
better.
yeah.
So this is like single origin, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing this, India green cardamom. And this is like the top of it. So this is this really cool spice company. I think they're based in Oakland, California. And I know, by the way, I knew about them before Christophe Laudemille has been talking about them all the time lately. But
for the record.
So I made this super, super cool tincture with these green cardamom pods and kind of like mushed them up with a mortar and pestle. And you guys wouldn't believe how amazing it smells. Much, much stronger than just like using cardamom absolute or cardamom essential oil. It smells phenomenal. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. It's too strong. I have to dilute it because it actually like makes your skin feel warm.
Oh, wow.
Put it on your skin. It's really, really strong. So I would have to significantly dilute it.
Yeah.
The other thing is, unfortunately, spicy fragrances don't sell very well. They're not very popular. So that kind of bums me out. But I have this.
Bums me out too, because I love spice and fragrance.
Do you?
Yeah, I do.
We must be the only two, Joseph. But I will tell you, I have this like method to my madness that when I first started, I would just make whatever I wanted. And then I realized I also have to make money.
Right. You have to strike a balance so you actually can sell bottles. Yeah.
So for the, maybe the last 7 or 8 years, my kind of like program is every time I'll release a fragrance that is something that like people have been asking for, like we unfortunately don't have it anymore, but we had this vanilla scent, and like every single day people would ask for vanilla, and I really didn't want to make it. And every single day people would ask for vanilla, and I would show them perfumes with vanilla in it. But if there's one thing I've learned, when people are like, what do you have with sandalwood? It doesn't matter if you show them a perfume with a predominant sandalwood note, because it's a base note. If they're not hit over the head with sandalwood almost immediately, that's not what they want. When they say they want sandalwood, they want sandalwood. When they say they want vanilla, they want to be engulfed in frosting vanilla. You know what I mean? And so I made this vanilla perfume. It was our best selling perfume for years and years. And then we had to discontinue it, which is something that happens a lot with natural fragrances because there's a worldwide vanilla bean shortage. And I used hundreds and hundreds of pounds of vanilla beans to make this perfume. Like, you have no idea. And I used to be able to buy extract grade vanilla beans, which aren't maybe what chefs would want to use, but it didn't matter because we would chop them all up and put them in the perfumer's alcohol and filter them out. And I used literally a kilo of vanilla absolute, a kilo of vanilla CO2, and maybe 300 pounds of Tahitian and Madagascar vanilla beans to make a batch of vanilla perfume.
Oh my God.
And I would be able to buy these extract grade vanilla beans for relatively cheap because they weren't perfect, and some were long, some were shorter, and some of them were kind of dried out, but it wouldn't matter because all I needed them for was their smell. And now vanilla beans are so expensive. It's like, 2 vanilla beans, $50 or something. So there's no way we could to make this perfume, which was very popular. But where was I going with this?
We Are Sentient asks for you to do a cardamom.
Cardamom vanilla. I might be able to if I can get my hands on enough vanilla. That's been the problem for a number of years now, is that there have been so many tropical storms in all the places that grow vanilla beans that there's been a shortage. It's getting a little bit better. But even in a class that I taught, I think it was a gourmand class, and I felt like I had to give them vanilla. I bought vanilla from a supplier that I had it back in stock, and the quality was so bad. It was just so
what was it like?
We ended up using, usually when we have a class, they have lots left over after class that they can continue to work with, on their own. And we ended up using the whole vial in class, and it was just faintly vanilla. Like the content of vanillin was so low in this vanilla CO2, it was just like not good. So what's out there right now isn't very good quality. So what was my point to this story? I went off on a tangent. This happens to me.
No, tangents are welcome here. So I can try to do a rewind. We were talking about vanilla perfume.
Your next perfume might be.
The next perfume. And we went into the vanilla conversation.
Sometimes, or at least sometimes, I'm having trouble sourcing some ingredients.
Right.
That I can buy in a large enough quantity now that I know I can continue to make them for a period of time. So I'm learning a little bit of a lesson as my business grows, that I can't keep picking these really rare materials that I might not be able to source in a large enough quantity or to get a quality ingredient. So I do feel a little bit more limited sometimes recently in what I can pick and choose from to create a perfume. I remember my point of this. So every time I create a commercial perfume for people who are asking me to make a perfume, I'll let myself make a perfume that speaks more to me, that I know won't sell buckets. And so I am feeling more like making a creative perfume that might not sell buckets. So maybe I will make a spice perfume, Joseph. So sometimes they surprise me. So for instance, Heart of Darkness was a creative perfume I made more for myself that I knew
it's beautiful.
Never sell like phenomenally, and it's pretty popular now. But there are perfumes that I make, like Magnolia Mist, for example, that is something that I know that I need a very approachable floral that's a very clean note, because that's very hard to do in natural perfumery, and I get asked all the time, and I know I need to offer something like that. So every time that I'll make something like that, I'll let myself do something that I know maybe won't be, hitting the home run, but that lets me still creatively feel happy, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
I can't completely sell my soul.
Do you mind if I ask, Charna, do you think some of the material issues and the prices, do you think this is more to do with like climate change and in general, or do you think it's because there's so many new fragrance houses are opening and popping up? Do you think there's more demand for these materials, or do you think it's because, like you said, that that shrinking of the industry so that it's becoming more closed off and controlled, that's also kind of narrowing the opportunity to buy things like, because I feel like, or it could be all three. I mean, it could be a lot of different things. So I'm curious, as like, are you worried about that? Like, what are you worried about in the future for natural perfumery? Do you worry about, like EU regulations or anything like that? I've heard that the United States is going to be very soon, like in the next 5 years, putting into place regulations similar to the EU and California. So
those are really good questions, Rachel. I think that there perhaps is less of a demand for some of these more obscure ingredients out there. And because there's a homogenization of suppliers and a limited number of like these big cats out there who are selling the ingredients, they're not interested in small quantities. They're interested in the ingredients that make the most amount of money. And so I don't think they're maybe picking up the smaller suppliers. So I think that's leading to less options, like just as an example, I feel like, I read a couple of articles about how attars had almost completely disappeared. And because maybe some attention got focused on the fact that we weren't making these co-distillations anymore in India, there was a little bit of a resurgence and activity to try to bring them back again. And I think also part of that problem is a lack of sandalwood oil, right? Or sandalwood.
Right. Because that would often be the base for those attars. I remember it was a henna attar. It was made with henna. One of the most beautiful things I've smelled. The Miti attar, which and Miti attar is fascinating because they actually use earth, and it's co-distilled with sandalwood. And they're impossible to find now. I have these tiny 5 milliliter vials, and they're like these precious little potions that like I would never want to like I want to hold on to them for as long as I can because I don't know if they'll really be available anymore. But you're absolutely right. And I think of like the way that reduces the perfumer's palette as well. Like these things that show a lot of promise in perfumery, like things like cascarilla bark, that like there's no reason for them to not have more of a presence in perfumery, but the demand is not there because it's not as well known. It's relatively obscure, and it's just pushed aside in favor for all of the most recognizable things that are in the perfumer's palette. And as a result, that ends up taking away a lot of new frontier for the perfumer, especially when it comes to to natural perfume, that is. So, and then
you keep the regulations on top of that, and that makes things even worse, because if there's a chance that it's going to be banned or restricted, then there's even less of a desire to distill that particular ingredient, because they know they don't have a mainstream audience of perfume companies that want that distillation of cascarilla bark, because it could be a skin sensitizer. So they're not going to pay people to distill.
Yeah, that's why like Masoya bark, I don't even think it's being distilled anymore because I think it's like banned in perfumery. So there goes that industry for those who actually were distilling oil. And I loved Masoya bark because, like you were saying earlier, there's very few things that are lactonic in a natural perfume palette. But that was some beautiful stuff. I have a whole other story for another time where I put a little too much in, and there is sort of a reason why it was restricted, because it is quite a skin sensitizer, but beautiful smelling stuff. It's sort of like this coconutty and nutty kind of like sandalwoody kind of smell. It's hard to describe, but it's just beautiful stuff. Just wanted to direct our attention to the chat. We're going to be on for just a few more minutes here. There is AM who is with us, and he asks, your thoughts on red algae seems to be gaining popularity. Now, red algae, I always associated with it being a problem. If there's too much of it on the seashore, we have a problem as far as ecologically. Now, I'm wondering if we're taking, lemons and making lemonade out of it by using red algae for perfume. But I have heard very little on this. Actually, one place that I heard that there was a red algae note, and I actually mocked it. I'm like, there's nothing like the smell of red algae at low tide. Like, I was actually kind of shocked that it was a note in a perfume. So have you two heard anything else about red algae? So AM, is this coming up in multiple newer releases? Like there's a red algae note or red algae accord? You got to have to educate us a little bit more on it. I saw one thing. It was like a newer designer release, and they were like, and a note of red algae. And I just was so like, how is that supposed to be romantic or like, ooh, I'm running for this. Like, just like, to me, I don't even think it has like a nice aroma. I don't get it. Don't get it. A lifestyle not for sale is here to remind us that everything will be okay. And we appreciate that message. And also, let's aim for 20 likes by the end of the live stream. I think we're up to 15 or 16 if somebody wants to do a tally. So where do we go from here? We have a few more minutes here. I think we've covered a lot. This has been a great conversation. We can just chat just a little bit more. Rachel, especially if you had any other questions or anything.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'd love to know a little bit more. Like another fragrance that I'm really loving to wear is Drunk on the Moon. Is that still for sale on your website?
It is, and that is one of my personal favorite scents, even though I know I'm not supposed to say that. I love Drunk on the Moon, and I always feel like my best fragrances are usually the ones that are not the most popular. I swear. And it's always the ones that once they're gone, people are like, oh, I really loved that, or that was my favorite fragrance. I'm like, okay, but did you buy it? But I absolutely love Drunk on the Moon. I think it's a really, really cool scent. And I love the boozy dry down that it has from the Apopanox. It's interesting because Apopanox essential oil and Apopanox absolute smell wildly, wildly different.
They do, I know.
Yeah, the essential oil honestly isn't that cool, but the absolute has this like beautiful, like malty, scotchy, boozy, slightly powdery.
It reminds me of like toffee,
yes,
but with a little bit of bitterness because it is like in that family. A little bit of bitterness, but that sweet toffee. It smells sticky. It smells rich.
And it is sticky. You should see
and when we're thinking in terms of things like Shalimar or those classics, it's really the resinoid of the Apopanax. And you're right. The essential oil is interesting. I could see it being interesting as like a modifier, but on its own, it's a rather like sharp, very sharp, very like kind of like it almost smells like, this is probably just going to sound weird, but when you're a kid, I don't think, maybe I was a weird kid, and you're like, you have a friend who dares you to like, yeah, put your tongue at the end of the battery, I dare you. And you have that like nasty kind of it has that smell like of a battery, like in the top notes. It's very like, and then it drives down kind of more myrrh-like. It's not really the most pretty smell, but it's that resinoid, the absolute or the resinoid that really is the classic Apopanax. And I love Apopanax.
Yeah, it's absolute. I love it too. And that perfume is like, for me, I would describe it as a more wintry kind of fragrance. It has, some peachy notes. It has heliotropin in it. It has tuberose, a ton of real tuberose absolute, which is like a very buttery floral note that doesn't smell like what people expect. I don't think a lot of people have a lot of experience smelling real tuberose. Like they think fracas, like that's their like what they think tuberose smells like. But real tuberose absolute, especially that particular one that I used in that perfume, is like a very buttery white floral, but it's lacking a lot of like the old lady floral notes to it, it is almost like it's a very unisex, almost like a vintage cocktail. It's very, I think it's a really interesting, well-balanced perfume. I really like that perfume. I think it's one of my better fragrances. I think interesting. I think it's unisex. I think I like that perfume. Like, I think it's, I think it has a lot going on in there. And like, that's one of the perfumes, just like I used to have a perfume called Osmanthus Oolong. And then once it's gone, everyone's like, oh my God, that was such a great perfume. Where is it? And I'm like, well, it's gone now. Like, you could have tried it. I always think my best perfumes are the ones that don't necessarily get bought or talked about as much while they're around. And then when they're gone, people are like, oh, where'd it go? I'm like,
they would be like the critically acclaimed ones are often the ones that don't end up selling. You have to kind of like have that meat and potatoes. Like, this is the one that's going to, bring in the income. And it's like that for a lot. Yeah, you have to have those big sellers. Yeah.
And real quickly, you mentioned kind of the temperature thing, because you said a little bit wintry, but that's exactly right. And then also, you know how like there's that period of transition time when you turn off the heat in your house, but morning is still cold. Yes. And I love specifically to wear this fragrance to keep me warm. Like, I'll spray it on in the morning after I've turned off my heat, but before the mornings are still warm. There's like that transition of like, very early spring, very late winter. And this perfume is perfect for that, because in the morning it kind of gets my headspace and mind warm and keeps me warm, and like until the afternoon gets warm, and it's like just perfect for that temperature. Like that 40-degree temperature is
Oh, there's also nutmeg absolute in that, which is another ingredient that I love. Like, the absolute is so much better again than the essential oil. It's like very like rich and voluptuous and smooth. Like, it's just, I really like that perfume. I know you're not supposed to have favorites when you make them, but I really think that's a good, like, well-balanced, interesting perfume. I do. I'm glad you like it.
Very much. Well, there's a lot that I like.
Thank you.
Yeah. JJ, should we keep going, or is it, I don't know anyone's time constraints. Sorry, I didn't want to.
No. So we can go on. I mean, unless there's another engagement, we can go on for a few more minutes if you have any other questions. I wanted to give you the opportunity, as long as Charna is available, for a few more minutes, because I know you had a couple of questions. So.
Oh, sure. I mean, yeah.
Oh, but go ahead.
I just wanted to say one other thing, going back to the regulations and IFRA and all of that. This will probably be a very obvious statement coming from a natural perfumer, but I really, truly think that the customer should get to decide what they wear, right? Like, because I have kids, in my mind, I always compare these sort of like IFRA regulations to like the whole peanut butter scandal, right?
Exactly.
Because you can't, heaven forbid, you can't send your kids to school with, peanut butter and chili sandwich, or even a granola bar that might have been, processed in a factory that, also processes nuts, because so many kids have peanut allergies now. But we don't ban peanut butter in the United States. Right? We let the customer make the choice or the decision. We put disclaimers on things. And I kind of feel like perfume should be the same way. Like, if you're listing the ingredients, which is another new thing on my website, that all of the ingredients are listed, like literally all of the ingredients are listed on the website in order, in formatted, everything. I feel like, letting the customer decide. If they say like, oh, nope, I have an allergy to so-and-so, I can see it on the ingredient list, I'm not even going to try this one.
Well, I think that the EU regulations are draconian. And I think that, IFRA, people always point fingers at IFRA, but IFRA is trying to like salvage perfumery as we speak, dealing with these restrictions and these regulations and these. And I really do hope that we're not going to be affected here in North America much the same way as it is in the European Union, because it's really, making it difficult for perfumers. And we're just seeing more and more materials that are like things like rose absolute.
I heard about that because of the eugenol or the little.
I mean, the eugenol thing is ridiculous in itself. I mean, it's the fact that these could be potentially, possibly a carcinogen in some sort of capacity somewhere, someone in time. if they slathered, tons and tons of eugenol on their body every day, they they were in a tub of it every night. Just because hypothetically somebody may possibly get cancer after 20 years of doing that doesn't mean that we need to restrict it the way that we restrict it, considering the industry, the industrial exposure to industrial hydrocarbons that are known to be carcinogenic. There's no regulation on that, and we're exposed to that in pesticides in our food. We're exposed to that in many different types of consumer products. They're not banning these things, and they're not banning the products that use these things. It's absurd. I'm pretty outspoken about it myself, and yeah, I can't really say that I'm exactly that I'm an expert on it, but I feel like there is some sort of conspiracy behind it to ensure that there's more of a monopolization of,
yes,
because you can't use these natural materials or A, B, and C, you must use what we now produce.
Right.
Yeah. Industry capture. Exactly.
Industry capture. Thank you, Rachel. I was trying to find the right term for it. And I fear that is happening in this industry, much like the Amazonification as well. It's all part and parcel. It's all part of the same thing. And hopefully that's not true, but yeah. It's unfortunate. I mean, for things that have been used in perfumery for hundreds of years, like the staples of perfumery are at risk, like lavender. Like, come on.
I know.
So everyone should support some natural perfumers,
yes.
support some independent artisanal perfumers, support people like Pia Long and Christophe Lodemiel who are fighting for the perfumer's palette. This stuff is important if you love perfume. So.
And Charna's website is in the description. You can visit it right there. I'm going to start putting on the, of course the theme music is turned down. I'm like, oh, here's the theme. See, I'm trying to be, this is the tough part, is I don't have anybody to do all of the special effects stuff in the background. So this is the music, which means we're going to be wrapping up here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well,
thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Joseph.
Stick around. We'll chat just a little bit more backstage after we're live. Those who are tuned in, we're going to have another Effluvium in 2 weeks, and that is going to be with Love is a Scent from Instagram. She also has a Substack, so she'll be sharing a discussion with us. And then we'll have another one 2 weeks after that, TBA. And next week, I'm going to be doing a Notes and Accords live stream, and that's just going to be on fougères. So the first hour, as usual, I'm going to be discussing all of the raw materials, both natural and synthetic, that can go into a fougère. And then in the second hour of that live stream, we will be going over all of the favorite fougères in my vast collection of fragrances. So that's going to be next week. So tune into that, the fougères, Notes and Accords. And yeah, thank you again, Charna, for accepting our invitation. This has been a fantastic conversation. We're going to head backstage. And in the meantime, we'll see you viewers very soon. All right, just stick around, girls. I'm going to be getting back to you in a moment.